Welcome to Piano Inspires podcast, celebrating pianists, teachers, and innovators as they share their inspiring stories about the transformative power of music.
Are you passionate about piano education and eager to delve deeper into its nuances? The Journal of Piano Research is your gateway to scholarly articles focused on the art and science of piano education, proudly presented by the Francis Clark Center for Keyboard Pedagogy. We are calling researchers and educators to contribute to the Journal of Piano Research by submitting manuscripts of original research projects. Our international publication fosters systematic scientific exploration of piano teaching, learning and performing, and discussion across a spectrum of methodologies, from quantitative and qualitative research to ethnographic, historical, and philosophical approaches. Each issue showcases original, unpublished research that aims to elevate professional understanding, practice, and scholarship in piano pedagogy. Visit journalofpianoresearch.org to learn more about submission guidelines, current articles, and how you can contribute to the dialogue that shapes our community. Thanks for listening to the Piano Inspires podcast, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Piano Inspires podcast. I'm Andrea McAlister, Director of Digital Programming for the Francis Clark Center, and I'm so very pleased to be joined by Dr. Jody Kerchner today. Jody Kerchner is a professor of music education at Oberlin College, where she specializes in secondary school music and choral music education. She is founder and conductor of Oberlin Music at Grafton, a prison choir at the Grafton Correctional Institution. Prior to teaching at the collegiate level, Kerchner taught K-8 general and choral music and was conductor of the Oberlin Youth Chorale. An active clinician, she has presented keynote addresses, research papers, and pedagogy workshops nationally and internationally. Kerchner also frequently serves as guest choral conductor for elementary, middle, and high school honors choral festivals and is currently the president-elect for the International Society for Music Education.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Kerchner. And I think pointing out in your bio that you are a choral specialist on our Piano Inspires podcast.
Yes.
You are the first non-pianist to agree to come on our podcast. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. And in all fairness, piano is where I started.
Oh,
in my life.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I started taking piano lessons in third grade. And as I even went into college, my undergraduate years at Westchester University in Pennsylvania, I was studying piano. And I was both a piano major and a voice major. Dropped the piano major due to some injuries, piano injuries. And so I don't feel out of the water on this one. I feel that, yeah.
Well, you shouldn't, because the piano inspires, but music inspires. And so really we embrace all music and musicians, and we all have important things to teach one another.
Absolutely.
Yes. So how was it that you started playing the piano in third grade?
Yeah. My mother, frankly, came from a very poor family and never had the opportunity to study piano. And so she was convinced that any child of hers was somehow going to play the piano. And she really lucked out because I fell in love with practicing. And in every spare moment that I had, I was practicing, much to the chagrin of my parents, who wanted me to do other things like sports or, go outside, be with friends, things like that. But when you live in a really rural area, you tend to have not a lot of friends immediately available. And so I turned to the piano for that comfort and socialization and self-expression.
I completely understand the growing up in the rural area. And so were there, certainly at school, you had your friends and your classmates.
Yeah.
Were there any others that were really involved in music? And also, like, what kind of teachers were available in your area, being a rural place?
I was bused 45 minutes from the house to go to school every day. And so I was the Pennsylvania Dutch kid that grew up in the farm area of the school district. And so I didn't really know who was taking piano lessons at that time until I would go to my teacher's piano recitals at her home, which was, maybe a block away from the school. And I would see people that I knew, but we never knew of each other as taking piano lessons, even from the same teacher. And so once one was closer to the high school, middle school, elementary school, it was relatively easy to find really quality teachers, music teachers. So I was lucked out. I lucked out, I should say.
What do you remember about your first teacher?
Mrs. Sweeney. I remember everything about her. 1970s child, right? So this teacher just wore these long, flowing pantaloon pants, and she had an old grand piano that had very ornate feet. Legs, and only when you knew a piece from memory that you were preparing for her in-house recitals, her studio recitals, could you try to play it on her grand piano. And that was just the coolest thing, because at home I had a little spin that was probably the cheapest thing and yet probably the most expensive thing that my parents could afford. And so I remember Mrs. Sweeney, she could just look at music and play it. And I really didn't understand how that could happen. Until now, when people say, well, how do you just do that? How do you sit down and play? Or how do you sing that? Lots of years of practice. But I just was intrigued by her. She was always so kind. And I forget the name of the music books that we used. It was not Thompson, but it was Bellwin Mills publication. They had like different colors on the outside book, and she would get to sign at the completion of the book, and that was a big deal.
Oh, do you still have those books?
I do. And the composer plastic busts that I would earn for certain hours of practice. And I had a lot of those because that's all I ever did was practice.
Oh, well, it sounds like your parents were so supportive, even if they maybe wanted you to go out and do other things.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely. I mean, Mrs. Sweeney charged $3 for a half an hour lesson. And so I know the sacrifice that meant for my parents. And they always drove me to lessons, and they always encouraged me. And they, even though they might have heard me practice the alley cat or the maple leaf rag or something like that, that this is up, this is down, this is up and down, those little songs. They just thought that I was the best piano player they had ever heard, which probably means that they hadn't heard other pianists.
Well, and I think we had very similar upbringings in that way, because I'm sure you may have been one of the best pianists that they had heard live, performing live. So
true.
That's quite a gift that they were able to give you.
Oh, immensely thankful for that. And, it just... I didn't know that as a choral director how much that piano background and accompaniment skills and, vamping skills and just, affecting the speed of learning the vocal music. I had no idea how that would intersect until I had to make it intersect,
So how did you come to double major in piano and voice? Were you also taking voice lessons?
I never took a voice lesson. The only reason I was doing both majors in music education at that time was because my choral director said, hey, I think you're good enough to do both. I was, when thinking about becoming a math teacher, I loved music, but I never knew anybody who made a living doing music. And so that wasn't even a part of my vocabulary until Mr. Sunderman at the high school level said, you could do both. And so I auditioned on both and got in on both, and that was it. Yeah. I really, truly just kind of fell into this. I didn't have that model before me of what's possible as a career path, or, even what majors in college would be, or the whole notion of competitions. What's that about? I mean, I had never done that. And so this was a new world of engaging my piano playing skills and my singing skills as well.
We're so often nudged in the right direction. We could say it's the right direction now, because we can look back and retrospectively say, well, what how important it was that this person
Mm.
was there at this time to say, well, what about this?
Absolutely.
Something you never considered before.
It's absolutely one of those turns that, that piece of encouragement. And remembering my piano, it was this woman, her name was Miss Souders, and she always wore a sweater with a sweater clip. And she would come around to our elementary schools, and she would literally push an upright piano from classroom to classroom. And I always thought, wouldn't this be cool to do that? I mean, not push the piano, but to teach music. And she was a fantastic pianist as well. And so, I wonder what would happen if I hadn't had Miss Souders and Mrs. Sweeney and all those other teachers that played a very influential role in my getting to where I am.
So choral conducting, you dropped the piano due to injury.
Yeah, hand and shoulder injury. Yeah, tendinitis. And so I still continue to play, but I didn't have the strength and endurance to be a piano major.
Mm-hmm. But you could conduct.
Yes. I mean, conducting didn't come along until maybe, the latter part of my undergraduate studies. And certainly as I got a K-8 music teaching job that involved choral and general music, I needed to bolster those conducting skills. And so I also learned how to use my body a little bit more effectively and efficiently too. And
through conducting?
Through conducting. Yeah, just body awareness. And nobody had ever talked about wellness and healthy playing and healthy singing. That wasn't part of the conversation at that time. But it certainly is now, and certainly with our students too.
Yes, thankfully.
Yes.
It's
absolutely
become much more transparent.
Yep.
Which is needed.
Yeah, and physical therapy, how that plays into it, and exercise and all that. So I often wonder, would I be playing more piano had I had those services earlier on, specifically at the undergraduate level? Who knows?
I am curious about your experience with the K-8 choral conducting.
Are you now?
I am, because, growing up in the environment you did, and maybe not having a lot of connection pianistically with peers because you only saw them in these certain situations, but you did see students at school in choir and create music. What was it about that in particular, about choral conducting and working with children, that really drew you to that?
I'll start with the easiest part, and that's the teaching part. I knew I wanted to be an elementary, junior high. Well, let me rephrase that. I knew I wanted to be an elementary or high school choral director.
We could skip over.
However, when the superintendent of schools in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania said, "Hey, and you want to do middle school choir?" Sure, I would love that job. And actually, I did. And it was unexpected. But that being said, my mother was an elementary school third grade teacher for 34 years. Same classroom, same school building, all that. So lots of consistency. And she was probably, when I observed her for some of my assignments at the collegiate teacher training program, I thought my mother was probably the most creative thing on the face of the earth. I had no idea what my mother did. I had no idea, how or why she would come home totally exhausted. But once I saw what she was doing and how she treated with such empathy and compassion the children in her class, I absolutely knew why she was fatigued. And so I wanted to be like my mom, and so teaching, and I grew up with doing her bulletin boards and grading, helping her grade and things like that. So teaching was always a part of our household. And so that engagement really, that was my model for that. In terms of choral conducting, I was fascinated by the elementary school choir. I was fascinated that I could have, fourth and fifth graders singing Bach in German, the Bist du bei mir, for example. I was intrigued that junior high school voices at the time, called junior high, now probably a middle school, But I was intrigued how these changing voices of the male and female at that time, really thinking binary in terms of gender identification, how could these changing voices and unstable voices, how could they possibly sing together as a choir? And so that intrigued me to find ways that I could work with those voices. And that meant at times I was not just conducting a choir, but I was composing for the choir, and rearranging Schubert or rearranging or creating a part for the kids, especially the tenor bass voices who, maybe had 2 or 3 pitches at their, facility, just writing for those voices to keep them singing actively. And I absolutely fell in love with that. It was a hard sell in a way for me to think about going to graduate school in terms of doing my doctoral work at Northwestern, because I had to give up my job, and I couldn't imagine leaving the classroom and the rehearsals behind. And I don't think I ever really did, even now that I'm at Oberlin. I always have my fingers somewhere in the pie. In terms of the classroom. Yeah.
Well, that creativity that you're able to, that comes out of you because you get to work with individuals. And I think this is where it doesn't matter what instrument we're talking about. No. It's you're responding to the individual needs. Absolutely. And if you have this voice that has these specific needs, not only how can you be creative to engage the voice, but to inspire the person.
Yes. And as one is inspiring the individual and recognizing their talents, the assets that they bring to a group, to keep in mind the focus of the group as well. And how can you co-create this thing we call a choral piece or a song? What does that even mean? What does that look like in terms of rehearsal pedagogy? So asking questions and giving opportunities to the students, individual students, and then kind of stepping away and just being the facilitator in many ways is important.
Now, you said you have your hand in a lot of different things. And one of those things is a choir at a local prison, Grafton Prison. Can you tell me a little about how that came to be? What inspired you to reach out, or did they come to you? How did that take shape?
Typical of my life, it came to me. I'm a classically trained singer and pianist. I know how to read standard Western notation. All these things are pretty traditional in my background. And a colleague of ours at Oberlin, former colleague now, was describing to me a theater program that she had started, the Oberlin Drama at Grafton, and said that the prison administration and the men, because it is an all-male prison, state prison, that they were interested in beginning a choir. And so she hesitated and said, "Oh, but you conduct choirs." And I immediately kind of laughed and said, "Oh, no, no way. I mean, this isn't on my bucket list to accomplish." And on the way home from this event where I saw her and she asked me to consider starting a choir, my husband said, "Hey, Professor Kerchner, you believe that music is a birthright and music experience is something that all people should have access to. And so why are you saying no?" And I couldn't come up with a reason. It wasn't that I was afraid of the prison or the people I'd be working with. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't then, and I'm not now afraid. So I thought, okay, I'll just volunteer, and I'll volunteer for a 6-week program. And it's been 10 years now. So it's an all-male prison choir. It's we have about 37 participants. And the choral rehearsal, I think, looks a lot like any other adult choir would look like in terms of learning to sight read and learning to read. I mean, some of the men are illiterate in terms of linguistic literacy, let alone musical notation. And so we do movement exercises and warm-ups and then learn literature and talk about the lyrics and the emotional capacities that we can bring to the literature. And we perform twice each year, one usually in December, one usually in May, April, May. And we perform for the general population at the prison, but then also another concert for their friends and families, as well as the larger Oberlin community. So it's been, ironically, something that I said I thought I was saying no to has become a passion point, actually, in my career. Unexpected.
Well, there are a lot of unexpected things in life that we think we're saying no to, and then all of a sudden we're leading a choir for 10 years.
Yeah.
How has it changed over the last 10 years? Because thinking back 5 years, we were in the midst of a pandemic. So how did you navigate all those challenges? What kept you going through all this and not just throw in the towel and say, this is getting way too difficult?
Yeah. Initially, when I started the program, the choral program, there was a deputy warden who had been a trumpet performance major at a college in Ohio. And so she understood the worth of music and was very keen in supporting this in most ways. In terms of the pandemic, I had sought approval. It was during my sabbatical. The pandemic coincided with my sabbatical from Oberlin. And so the travel and research that I was planning on doing, for better or for worse, didn't happen. And so I had to get special permission from the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections to have Zoom meetings. And so every Friday we met via Zoom, and I didn't have the bells and whistles of audio, the technology. It was literally, I knew I needed to be in my piano accompanying at least a half a bar ahead of where they were going to be singing because of the lag in time. And other times, it was just about human connection and there was no music that was being done. But I really felt that we needed somehow to keep going, whatever that was. So that was that. And when the pandemic was over, the prison officials had experienced lots of volunteer loss and not starting up their volunteering again. And I didn't want to stop what I was doing. And by that point, students from Oberlin College and Conservatory, they were also involved, and I was seeing the impact it had on them. So we just kind of kept going. What's happening now, as is the case probably across the country, is that, services and, educational opportunities are really on a restrained and restricted due to staff monitoring and things like that. So I don't know what's going to continue on or how things will change. Certainly in Ohio, there's been a push for more conservative rather than a progressive, pro-social resident. I'll use that term for the persons who are incarcerated. So, you kind of just ride the waves of up and down. And interestingly, I think that the pandemic was not as difficult as it has been in terms of the policies that have come out of the State Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections that I've had to work with and around to try to rationalize to them why we need to continue the program.
It's very interesting. So if you were sitting with a lawmaker and you said, this is essential that we continue this program, why?
I had reached educational status with the program before the pandemic. And after the pandemic, I was, not me, although it felt like me, demoted to recreation.
Oh.
Which is fine.
Okay.
At least I was acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
Some programs were not allowed to return. So I'll take the demotion, so to speak. But in terms of the policy, talking about how the prison choir allows people of an unlikely place or with various diverse backgrounds educationally, socioeconomically, culturally, racially, you name it, bringing them together to work for a common goal. I often say to the wardens, when these folks, and if they are ever going to be released, I want to know that they can be my neighbor. I want to know that they know how to self-express and to be respectful in a community living environment. Not that many of the guys that I work with will ever be released. But I think, in terms of the humanity, the notion that the men are creators, performers, listeners, community members, dare I say, to use a jargon term, artistic citizens in their location. It's a limited temporal space that the citizenship is living in. And that's in direct conflict, or at least the tension between the citizenship that we're trying to practice and develop in terms of self and collectively within our choir, but also the tension point of, they're not having the human rights that are taken away, voting, or if they are released, some of those are collateral damages from prison in terms of getting a job or owning a home or even having access to housing. So, the skills that they are learning, the interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that we are practicing, they're important life skills. Music is the vehicle.
You mentioned artistic citizen. And I know you've done a lot of thinking and reading and writing about artistic citizenship.
Yeah.
Can you, I know this is very difficult and it isn't one sentence long, but what is your definition of artistic citizenship? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Artistic citizenship for me is an individual that's engaging with the musical materials, but also interacting with others in that music-making process so that individual voices are heard and there's a quest to understand other through music. Problematic is that with any definition or many of the early definitions of artistic citizenship, it almost excludes people. You have to ask, okay, if who's a citizen, who's not a citizen? For example, the men in my choir, they can be artistic and they can be a citizen of the community that is a choir, or the songwriting workshops that we have, or the string program that we have. But who's not allowed to be part of that community? And the prison has rules set that the men have to be compliant in their court-appointed programming. They cannot be part of the mental health unit and be part of these music programs. So artistic citizenship, it's an interesting term that to me it's about belonging. It's about gaining insidership. It's about being an understanding self and looking beyond self to thinking what it is that the group also needs in terms of the music, rehearsal, performance, etc.
So when you say belonging, if we took this into a broader community, what would that look like in a community that wasn't a prison, but it was just a community? And what is the responsibility of the musician, the artist, to that community? What does that belonging look like?
I think belonging, your environment, you seek to find ways to engage with the environment in a musical way. Knowing that some of the people in your environment might be connoisseurs of music through listening, or they might play by ear, or that they are listening to music that you might not ever think about listening and aren't on your playlist, your preferences. I think it's a respect of the different ways that people can engage with music. Christopher Small has used the word musicking. I think that experiencing these musical behaviors, because oftentimes I think performance is one of the few musical behaviors that we as a society say, okay, this is really what music is about, the performance. But I think it's more musical behavior than that: composition, improvisation, listening, etc. Acknowledging that and acknowledging an array of skills that anybody can do this. And there are different levels of abilities. And it doesn't matter. The point is that they're engaging with the musical sound. So I think that's our responsibility as musicians, to bring new musics, different musics, expand the musics that people listen to and might want to get to know. I'm not sure I answered that question, Andy.
No, I don't know that I don't know that there is an answer to that question, because every community is different.
Yep.
Every artist is different. So if you go into a community, let's say I, as a pianist, go into a community and say, well, I'm going to present to you the music of Chopin. What if my community doesn't want that?
Yeah. And that's part of that, knowing that environment, isn't it? I mean, what are the needs of the community? What are they wanting? If we're sharing our social and cultural capital, what is it that we can bring to them? And really listening instead of imposing. And then there has to be that reciprocal relationship. What can the community, or what does the community provide in terms of us as musicians? What's that reciprocal relationship looking like?
So what can the artist learn from?
Absolutely.
The community. So it's a two-way street.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so. I mean, when I think about teaching, I'm learning from my students, and they keep me on my toes, because in many cases they are much more well-versed in the literature and the recordings, and and their performance skills are at such a high level at the conservatory. And at the prison, I'm learning about different things that they listen to and how to be within their community. So I think it's important to know and to ask questions,
And be open.
Yes, that intellectual curiosity is important, and humility is important.
Do you think it's within, or maybe under the umbrella of artistic citizenship, it also affects communities on a more, I don't want to go into politics, but kind of on a political level, in terms of changing the hierarchy or what the community thinks or values? Is that part of artistic citizenship?
I hope so. I mean, I think anything we do as teachers, musicians, is political. So by the very nature of how we engage others musically, that's a role model of how we want to engage with others and how we might expect them to engage with us. And that's negotiation. That requires negotiation and practice on both sides. I'm thinking about the prison officers, for example, at the Grafton prison. Oftentimes it's a point of tension between my students and me when we discuss relationships at the prison, and their immediate draw is, oh, you have to be proactive and pro-social for the residents, the people who are incarcerated. And my thing for them is, yes, I do. That is a priority. And it is also a priority to listen and try to understand all the actors. And that includes the prison officials, which our students can take offense at, that I would even want to have a relationship. But I think it's about sharing humanity, and leaving space for people to be able to reframe their perception and perspective about other people. So that is political to me. That is, no matter what if we're really defining this as political in terms of, parties, I think it's larger than that.
Yes.
It's political in terms of what are the rules of engagement? How do we want to be treated? How do we treat? What are our philosophical beliefs that lead us to certain pedagogies, or how we see our role with other in society or in a music lesson?
Mm-hmm. And all parties, based on the engagement, are changed.
Absolutely.
In some way.
And it's a co-constructed change. It's a co-constructed transformation in that, anytime we engage with others, something changes. We're either affirming our beliefs or there's a question mark at the end of our engagement of why doesn't that fit within the beliefs and biases that I bring to the interaction? And do I need to consider other way? I think what we as artists do is a way of showing creative problem solving, creative and kind, compassionate ways of engaging. So I think it's essential that young people study music because, again, these are I hate to even say the word soft skills because to me, they're not soft at all. They're primary skills of life.
So we need more musicians in the world.
I think so. And what does musicians mean? That might be the person who has a rock band in their garage. I'm not talking about professional musicians at all. I mean, they're part of it, but I know from my own experience, we're changed because of the music that we invite into our lives.
Very much so, yes. Now, related, you are also, as I mentioned, the president-elect of the International Society for Music Education.
Yes, I am.
And so you have such a broad view of music education, not just within your community, but globally. You are impacted by others through this organization, and anyone who really engages internationally is. But I feel like you have this other perspective being involved with the board for as long as you have, and now going into the president-elect role. What changes, maybe is the word I'm looking for, do you foresee in music education globally? Or what are some things that you wish people could connect from region to region, that I wish they knew this about each other, because it would make this piece of the puzzle so much easier for this group if they knew what this other culture or other country was doing musically?
Yeah. First of all, it's an incredible honor to have been voted president-elect. And I'm using these 2 years of this president-elect position to really learn more and ask questions. And yes, make mistakes along the way as well. But it seems to me that we're all looking to redefine humanity and human connections. And I think music is one of those inherently useful commodities, if you would, or artistic endeavors that allows that connection, whether it's a soloist on stage connecting to an audience or connecting to composers of the past and the current composers. So I think we're struggling to find those connections. And I think that's, as I've heard from our ISME partners, institutional and professional associations, they're finding ways to engage. And what's the role in technology and social media in all that? And how do we have our students, given the barriers of the financial barriers of travel and legal entry into other countries, how do we allow technology to help with that? Is one way that I think we have to look at. The other is, sheer numbers and bringing people together who from around the world who can be advocates for music instruction, music performance, music whatever, in our global context. ISME is part of, has mandates and has been founded as a part of UNESCO and is part of the World Arts Alliance. And so crafting declarations of the worth of arts education, yes, music education, but larger arts education. I think that there's safety and power in numbers in a worldwide situation where arts funding and arts in general are being reduced in drastic ways. So I think that advocacy piece goes along with connection. And finally, I think that the wellness issue, I think that we're seeing our students, maybe even ourselves, struggle with mental health issues, physical issues, and doctors. We saw this at the conference here, that doctors are plugging in to the music scene in terms of how can this how can music be used and consumed to solve anxieties, depressions, blood sugar issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think we're going to see much more on the wellness scene. At least I hope so. Really figuring out if we know that music is indeed affecting us in ways in our humanity that is different from any other art form or subject area. Not to say that they don't also, by the way, have affect people in their own unique ways, because they do. But to think that music can be used more proactively to remind ourselves, at the very least, of our humanity and the larger connection.
So some of what you just said is just things we need to utilize better.
Yeah.
Technology.
Yeah.
We have technology. We could use it in so many ways that are helpful, as opposed to some things we are seeing currently that are not as helpful, especially when you were talking about mental health.
Yeah.
So that exists. The medical references you discussed, and how music can actually be therapy, not just, we have music therapy in the world, but how are we using it beyond the tools that we're already using it for? And using it prescriptively, I guess, is the right word. So what does the musical community need to be prepared for? Are we prepared to use technology in these ways? Are we prepared for a student to come to us saying, my doctor prescribes music lessons? So thinking about current musicians, but then all of the students that we are training, what are the skills that we and they are going to need in the future? Yeah,
that's a great question. I'll pull out my crystal ball here. I think that, in terms of teacher training, we're finally starting to think about the diversities of learners who come our way and how to meet individual needs. I mean, we've been talking about this for decades, but I think we're, since the pandemic, we're finally at a point where the diversities of literature, the diversities of composers, the new musics, the redefining what and where music can occur. That takes a certain training. And I think it's training even within these newer communities where music has always existed, but we haven't plugged into. So I think moving out of our safety zone of a traditional private lesson or a choral rehearsal or a general music classroom, and having the skills, the adaptability skills to enter into new spaces. So again, learning how to question, learning how to listen, deep listening, and frankly, learning from our students what they need, asking those questions, and maybe learning different styles other than Western classical music, so that there's an array of music making, maybe not putting so much of an emphasis on notation reading, but thinking out of the box in terms of free improvisation or improvising accompaniments, things like that. It's a tall order. And traditionally, I think education has always been seen as the panacea to fix society's ills. And it's a tall order, a very tall order.
It is a very tall order. Yes. But I think musicians have always risen to the challenge of being in community and bringing people together. I feel like
absolutely
this is what we do, is we bring people together through music. It's that additional part of the listening to what the community is asking for and responding.
Yeah, it's also bringing into our consciousness, I think, how it is that we go about developing community musically. Because if we can think about chamber music groups or an ensemble, and we can be clear, maybe research or have dialogues that unpacks how does this community thrive? How does it exist? What brings people to want to engage with our musical community? Then I think we can market ourselves differently. I think we can develop the specific skills needed, but we have to understand it first before we can infuse those skills into any training session.
Well, this has been a very eye-opening conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Talking to you is always it makes me think deeply about the role of me as a musician, but also as an educator. So thank you for making me think and question.
I appreciate it.
So we always end our podcasts with the same question, but I'm going to tailor it a little differently for you, because we usually say, complete the sentence, piano inspires. But I think more broadly, how does music inspire?
Wow, which angle to take this? Music inspires the brain, the body, and the heart. It touches all points, and we can enter at any of those points. It is a heartbeat. It's has the potential to help us change and broaden our understanding of ourselves, and inspires us, I think, to get to know how other people make music and engage with it. So it sparks our curiosity, I think, as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Francis Clark Center is a not-for-profit educational organization that serves the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing. Divisions include Piano Magazine, Piano Inspires Kids, Journal for Piano Research, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, the New School for Music Study, Piano Education Press, International Online Teacher Education, and Piano Inspires Online Community Hub. Please visit us at pianoinspires.com to learn more about our impactful work and inspiring community.